Welcome to The Drum. I'm Steve Cannane. Coming up, Japan's nuclear crisis deepens. Julia Gillard's carbon tax confession. Will it make a difference with the voters? And John Pilger will join us to talk about Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. Our panel tonight, host of Radio National Breakfast, Fran Kelly, Peter Lewis from Essential Media, and Joe Hildebrand from the Daily Telegraph. The nuclear emergency in Japan is now considered the second worst in civilian history behind Chernobyl. In the latest developments today, the International Atomic Energy Agency is reporting that spent fuel storage pond at Fukushima reactor number 4 has been on fire and that radioactivity has been released into the atmosphere. Earlier today, there was another explosion, this time at reactor number 2. And officials confirmed it was possible the fuel rods at the number 1 reactor were melting. Everyone within 20 kilometres of the plant has been evacuated and people within a 30k radius are being urged to stay indoors. Now, these are aerial photos of the number 2 reactor before and after the earthquake and tsunami. And this shows how the natural disaster wiped out an entire village near the nuclear power plant. Japan's Prime Minister held a news conference this afternoon explaining the radiation risk and urging calm.
Hydrogen came out and causing a hydrogen explosion, and also for reactor 4 we have seen fire. And radiation has spread from these reactors, and the reading of the level seems very high.
Fran, this is terrible news out of Japan today. Fires in reactors, explosions in reactors and radiation leaking.
And now an admission from the Prime Minister, we heard their radiation levels very high. They're now admitting radiation levels within the areas around the plant, levels dangerous to human health. That's quite a clear statement, and the clearest they've been so far. They're not saying how far and wide those dangerous radiation levels are. It's obviously a deepening crisis they can't control. Reactor number 4 this morning when I was broadcasting was not even in the picture. Now there's it's on fire reportedly, and it's also having problems with inside and is leaking radioactive material. Number 2, an explosion today. That means 4 of the 6 at the Fukushima plant are in trouble and are basically out of control. They're basically indicating, these constant updates we're getting, that they don't know how to keep a lid on this crisis. Though, as we've just heard, they've expanded the evacuation zone. Everyone out within 20 k's, within 10 kilometres beyond that, stay inside.
And most people don't have petrol, so it's going to be hard for them to evacuate.
Or food, or power. It's freezing, there's no power, they can't go outside, they must be terrified. I mean, it's a pretty terrifying situation. And in Tokyo, they've registered radiation levels have hit that city. So, you know, this is not looking good.
And Joe, today a bit of light was shone on the culture of secrecy around these nuclear reactors, courtesy of WikiLeaks.
Yeah, look, it was. I have to say, this is stuff that's actually been on the record before. Concerns were raised contemporaneously about Japan's nuclear industry and its closeness with the government and how forthcoming it's been about how it's handled certain safety issues in the past. The MP who raised the issue, Taro Kono, is someone who says on his own website that he opposes the nuclear industry and the expansion of the nuclear industry, and also has raised grave concerns about it. And that's his prerogative. He comes from a progressive party, and good on him. He wants more alternative energy. But I'm not sure if it's a groundbreaking scoop for WikiLeaks. It's pretty pedestrian stuff that he has said to a US official. So I think there's obviously major questions that are going to be asked about just how well the industry is regulated in Japan and just what could be done. Though I also think we're talking about a natural disaster of unprecedented proportions.
We are talking about the 4th largest earthquake
in human history.
I don't think that's the issue of WikiLeaks, though. I mean, as Joe said, this is not news that the power company or the nuclear industry in Japan has not been forthcoming with a lot of information or a lot of... it's been investigated before for not maintaining safety regulations about 7 years ago. So it's been in trouble before for this. I think as I talk to people over the last few days about the population, how they're feeling about this, they're not tending to believe what their politicians and other authorities are saying about this nuclear crisis because they've been told things before or not told things before. So they're not terribly trusting, I think.
That's a real problem for them, isn't it, if they're not trusting the politicians and the officials from the nuclear reactors?
Yeah. Look, it's a problem in Japan. It's a problem globally now for the nuclear nuclear industry as well, I think, and we've seen them out really strongly. I thought a bit prematurely in Ziggy's case yesterday, saying it's safe, don't panic. Today, the rhetoric coming out of the nuclear industry, looking on the web, was it's not as bad as Chernobyl. It's not quite a reassuring message to be putting out to people. You know, the nuclear industry has worked really hard over the last 20 years to make people feel like this is a clean, safe source of energy. Last time we asked people, late December, Australians, the majority thought it would be okay to build nuclear reactors in Australia, although not in their backyard, as we always know. But, you know, this is going to recast that industry. It's too early to be really talking about this with the gobsmacking nature of the tragedy, but, you know, and 30% of Japan's power as well, you know. So this is just so many layers of misery, it's just not funny.
I think to play devil's advocate there, it's far too soon. I mean, none of us on this panel is a nuclear physicist, so we don't necessarily know.
How do you know?
Well, I am, but I didn't want to say anything here tonight. But I think, as Pete said, it is much too early to sort of go into this sort of politics. But what I was trying to say before, the scope of this disaster is so huge that necessarily, you know, a moderate cover-up in 2000 or something like that isn't necessarily the smoking gun. Like, obviously, you want your nuclear industry to be absolutely watertight. You want it to be absolutely fail-safe.
And you want them to be transparent.
But, you know, you can go to building companies and say, why did your building fall over?
But
you
the
can
implications of a failure of nuclear safety is much different than a failure to most other industries. You know, radiation is indiscriminate. It's not like a fire or, you know, a gas leak or an oil leak.
I think it's a reminder too of, I mean, sure, Joe's right, these are old plants. This is a 40-year-old plant at Fukushima. So, you know, presumably it's not the modern generation of nuclear plants that has been making us all feel a lot more comfortable.
I wouldn't be selling the bright new model now.
But what it reminds us is that how difficult this industry is